I leaned back against the cool leather of my office chair, the skyline of Manhattan glowing like a constellation through the floor-to-ceiling windows. From this height, the world felt small, almost quiet, though inside me there was always a hum. Memories I'd never quite silenced. I smoothed the silk of my blouse, the fabric slipping like water against my skin, and forced myself to breathe slowly. My phone buzzed on the desk, rattling against the glass. A family group chat. I almost never opened it, but the preview was enough. Can't wait for our summer trip to the lake house. Nothing compares. Our family's pride. I let out a short, ironic laugh. Their family's pride. The same lake house where I had once scrubbed dishes while they lounged on the deck. The place where I was reminded, again and again, that I was more servant than sister, more burden than blood. Now, they bragged about it every summer, posting glossy photos of sunsets I used to watch through streaked windows while folding sheets. And here I was, with the deed to that very house locked away in a safe only I could open. I traced the rim of my coffee cup, listening to the quiet hum of the city below, knowing it was time. Their message wasn't just a reminder. It was an invitation, one I intended to answer, but not in the way they expected. When I think back, it always begins with the smell of bleach and damp towels. I was 17, crouched over a bucket in the lake house laundry room, scrubbing stains out of sheets that weren't even mine. My cousins were upstairs, laughing, clinking glasses, talking about their futures at Ivy League schools. I was invisible unless a chore needed doing. Emily, grab more ice, my aunt would call. Or, Emily, clear these plates. And when I hesitated, just for a moment, I'd get the looks. That cold narrowing of eyes that said, don't forget your place. The sting wasn't just in their words, it was in the silence after. No one defended me. Not my parents, not my brother. To them, I was useful only when my hands were busy. That summer, something inside me cracked. I remember one particular night. I carried a tray of cocktails out to the porch, and my hands were shaking so badly the glasses clinked against each other. My uncle laughed, saying, "Steady there, sweetheart. You'd make a decent maid if you practiced." Everyone chuckled. My cheeks burned so hot, I thought my skin might split. I escaped to the dock, barefoot on the weathered boards, the night air heavy with pine and lake water. That's where my grandmother found me. She was the only one who ever seemed to notice my silence. She sat beside me, her shawl wrapped around her shoulders, and pressed a small, worn leather journal into my hands. "Write it down," she said softly. "Every hurt, every dream. Don't let them decide your story, Emily. You decide it." Her voice was steady, but her eyes shimmered with something unspoken, as if she knew I needed more than comfort. I needed a way out. That night, under a slice of moon, I made a promise to myself. I would never scrub another dish in that house again. I didn't know how, or when, but I would carve a life beyond their condescension. The next morning, with my grandmother's journal tucked into my backpack, I left the lake house early, before breakfast was served, before anyone could send me on another errand. My heart pounded with fear, but also something sharper, resolve. For the first time, I wasn't running away. I was running toward myself. Leaving wasn't glamorous. I didn't stride into a new life with confidence. I stumbled into it, broke and uncertain, clutching that leather journal like a lifeline. My first job was bussing tables at a small diner just off the highway in Albany. The smell of frying oil clung to my clothes, my feet ached from double shifts, and tips barely covered rent. But at night, when I opened the journal, I sketched plans, dreams, lists of goals. I wrote down everything I wanted to be, even when it felt laughable. The real break came when I met Claire Matthews, the diner's most demanding customer. She was a real estate broker, sharp, elegant, the kind of woman whose heels clicked with authority. One evening, after I refilled her coffee without being asked, she looked me over and said, "You've got eyes that don't belong here. Ever thought about real estate?" I laughed, shaking my head. "Me? The girl everyone treated like hired help?" But Claire didn't laugh. She slid her business card across the table. "Call me," she said. when you're ready to work harder than you ever thought possible. I kept that card tucked into my grandmother's journal for weeks. Finally, on a night when rent was due and my hands were raw from scrubbing dishes, I called. Claire became my mentor. She didn't sugarcoat anything. "This industry will eat you alive if you let it," she told me on day one. But she also gave me tools, books on negotiation, scripts for cold calls, lessons on confidence. I shadowed her at open houses, watching how she commanded a room with nothing but presence. The struggles nearly broke me. Clients slammed doors in my face. Some men treated me like decoration instead of a professional. I cried in my tiny apartment more times than I can count, staring at rejection letters while my dinner burned on the stove. But every morning, I pulled on a blazer from the thrift store, tied my hair into a neat bun, and told myself I wasn't going back. Not to that house, not to that girl who scrubbed dishes until her hands ached. The first time I closed a sale, a modest 2-bedroom bungalow, I remember sitting in my car afterward, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles went white. The commission check was small, but to me it was freedom. Proof that I could build something of my own. From there, momentum grew. One sale led to another, then to bigger homes, then to investment properties. Within 5 years, I wasn't just selling homes. I was buying them, flipping them, creating a portfolio. Claire would clap me on the back and say, "See? I told you those eyes didn't belong in a diner." Through it all, I kept quiet on social media. My family saw only carefully cropped photos, me at a cafe, me walking in Central Park. No flashy cars, no designer labels. They assumed I was barely scraping by, maybe still waitressing. I let them think it.
It was easier that way.
But behind closed doors, my world was expanding. And all the while, I kept one entry circled in my grandmother's journal, written in shaky teenage handwriting. One day, by the lake house. The summer they bragged the loudest, I decided it was time. Their group chat was buzzing with plans for another family retreat at the lake house. Photos of swimsuits, shopping lists, reminders of who was bringing the wine. I read each message with a half smile, knowing something they didn't. The house they worshipped as the jewel of our family wasn't theirs anymore. It was mine. I hadn't told them when I bought it, cash, quietly, through a shell company. The property had gone on the market after years of neglect and unpaid taxes, and I had signed the papers with trembling hands. The ink had barely dried before I drove there alone, unlocked the door with my new key, and stood in the foyer where I'd once been ordered to scrub muddy boots off the rug. The silence was thick with ghosts, but for the first time, I felt taller than the walls. Now, I waited. When they arrived that July afternoon, caravan of cars rolling up the gravel driveway, I was already inside. I'd restored the place, fresh paint, polished wood floors, new furniture that echoed elegance instead of arrogance. The lake shimmered beyond the windows, catching the sunlight like silver. I stood in the living room as the door burst open. My aunt came in first, chattering about where to put the groceries. My brother followed, his wife at his side, then cousins with their kids tumbling behind. Laughter filled the space, and for a moment, it was exactly as I remembered, meant for everyone but me. Then my brother froze. His eyes landed on me, standing calm and composed in a cream linen dress, glass of wine in hand. "Emily," he said, confusion twisting his face. One by one, they noticed me. Silence rippled through the group like a sudden draft. What are you doing here?" my aunt asked, her voice sharper than she intended. I let them take in the details. The artwork on the walls, the elegant decor, the subtle touches of luxury they couldn't miss. My fingers grazed the rim of my glass as I smiled faintly. "I live here now." A cousin laughed nervously. "Wait, you mean you rented it?" "No." I set the glass down on the marble counter. "I own it." The words hung in the air, heavy as thunder. Disbelief flashed across their faces, then a slow creep of shame, of dawning realization. My brother blinked, shaking his head. "That's impossible. This house, this is the family's." "Not anymore," I said simply. The taxes went unpaid. It went on the market. I bought it outright. My aunt's mouth opened, then closed. My uncle muttered something under his breath. The cousins looked at each other, as if waiting for someone to prove me wrong. But no one could. The silence was delicious, not because I wanted revenge, but because finally I was standing on even ground. No, higher ground. You treated me like a maid here. I continued, my voice even. Like I was useful only when I was carrying trays or folding laundry.
Do you remember that?
No one answered. Eyes darted, guilt flickering like shadows. Well, I said, folding my hands together, things have changed. This is my home now. If you want to stay, it will be as my guests. And as my guests, you'll treat me with the respect I should have had all along. I let the silence stretch until it was almost unbearable. Then softly I added, or you can leave. The choice is yours. Their stunned faces were all the validation I needed. They didn't leave. Not immediately, anyway. My aunt shifted awkwardly, setting the grocery bags down as if the weight of them suddenly pressed harder on her arms. My cousins whispered among themselves. My brother stared at me like he was trying to solve a riddle that had no answer. I let them sit with the discomfort. For once, I wasn't the one shrinking in the corner. I was the one deciding how this would go. Finally, my cousin Mark cleared his throat. So, if we stay, he said cautiously, what does that mean? I took a slow sip of wine before answering. It means new rules. My rules. They waited, restless, fidgeting. I could almost hear the echo of the past, orders thrown at me, chores piled on without thanks. Now, the script was mine to write. I looked at my aunt first. You've always prided yourself on appearances. But behind them, you've been cruel. If you want a place in my life, the gossiping stops. You start using your voice to build, not break. Her lips pressed together, her cheeks flushing.
She didn't argue.
Then, my eyes moved to my brother. You were supposed to protect me, but you stood by and let me be humiliated. If you want to be in this house, you'll make amends, not with me, but with your own kids. Show them what respect looks like. Teach them to value every person, not just the ones who look useful. His jaw tightened, but I saw the guilt flicker. He knew I was right. I turned to my cousins, each of them suddenly looking very small in the grand living room. You treated me like help when we were kids. If you want to come back here, you'll do the work this time. Cooking, cleaning, every chore you once pushed onto me, you'll shoulder it yourselves. They exchanged uneasy glances, but no one dared to laugh it off. And one more thing, I said, my voice softening but steady. No one in this family will belittle anyone's dreams again. Not mine. Not yours. Not your children's. If you want to spend summers here, you'll talk about what you're building, not who you're breaking. The room was silent, the only sound the quiet lapping of the lake against the dock outside. For the first time, I saw something shift in their faces, not just shame, but reflection. They weren't used to hearing me like this, with power in my tone and conviction in my stance. You can stay, I finished, but only if you honor these conditions. Otherwise, this house will be locked to you forever. It wasn't anger driving me, it was clarity. Compassion, even. I didn't want to erase them. I wanted to show them there was another way. But I would never again bend to the shape they once forced me into. I leaned back against the counter, calm and unyielding. The balance had shifted. And for the first time in this house, I wasn't a maid. I was the owner. The days that followed felt like a strange dream. My family didn't leave, though they moved through the house differently now, more careful, quieter. My cousins actually washed the dishes without being asked. My aunt paused before speaking, her words softer, less sharp. My brother spent more time with his children, reading with them on the porch instead of scrolling through his phone. It wasn't a perfect transformation, but it was a start. One evening, I walked out to the dock alone, barefoot like I had been all those years ago. The lake was calm, its surface rippling with the fading colors of sunset. I carried the worn leather journal in my hands, the one my grandmother had given me. Its pages were filled now, dreams achieved, hurts healed, promises kept. I sat on the edge of the dock and flipped to that one circled entry. One day, by the lake house. My throat tightened, and for a moment I felt 17 again, raw and unseen. But then I looked back at the house glowing warmly behind me, filled with voices that no longer drowned me out, and I knew I had kept my promise to myself. A soft breeze brushed against my skin, carrying the scent of pine. I thought of my grandmother, her shawl, her steady voice. She believed in me when no one else did. And in this moment, I hoped she could see me, hoped she knew her gift had built the life I was living now. I closed the journal and pressed it to my chest. I did it, I whispered into the twilight. The lake held my words like a secret, but in my heart, it felt like an answer. I wasn't their maid anymore. I wasn't their burden. I was the woman who owned the place they bragged about every summer. And more than that, I was finally completely free.